not do that right before. And I'd like to call to order a meeting of the Syracuse Industrial Development Agency. And we'll start by calling the roll of the board. I'm Kathy Murphy.
Ricky Brown.
George Sonneborn.
Steve Tassin.
Thank you very much. All are present. Proof of notice was properly served. Minutes of our last meeting held on July 18th were included in our packet. Any comments, changes, concerns? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve those minutes? Thank you, Ken. Is there a second?
Second, Ricky.
Second, Ricky. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a Finance Committee report. The Finance Committee met last Thursday and considered, I believe, 2 items on its agenda. The first being the 2024 proposed operating budget for the IDA, which was thoroughly vetted and explained in great detail. And I believe all our questions were addressed and answered. The Finance Committee made a positive recommendation to the board for consideration of the budget, which is included in today's agenda. Secondly, we did a review of a request for participation in structural repairs on a garage, which was also approved by the Finance Committee for consideration at this board meeting. Did I leave anything out? Does anybody want to add anything? No. The Finance. First item of new business is a consideration of an amendment request, language request by TLSP CODA. I might have gotten it right, finally. Wendy. And I believe Sue has the language to share with us. Sue?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. In your agenda is a resolution with respect to this project. This is the project up on East Fayette and Genesee Street. It involves the Ward Wellington Ward House. We closed on this project with the agency in July of this year. And at that time, the applicant came to us because their lender was very concerned about possible default in the future and what that would mean on the pilot structure. And at the time, because of timing, our answer was, if you're going to request any change in the way the pilot works when there is a foreclosure, you need to come back to this board. And so what the lender ultimately did was agree to close on the project with the applicant with the understanding that upon the first construction draw, if they did not have security in knowing that the pilot would sustain a foreclosure, they would require the applicant to post an additional $3 million as collateral. And so with that, the applicant has come back and asked this board to consider the possibility of amending its language in its leases and its pilot to allow for the pilot structure to remain in effect in the event of a foreclosure action. And so what that would mean is, if for some reason, and it's in an unlikely event, because I will say that this developer, this is what they do all over the country, so they're well versed in doing these types of projects. But in the event that there was a default under the mortgage and a foreclosure were to happen and the bank took ownership, the bank wants to step into the shoes of the applicant and cure the pilot, continue to operate the project, and have the ability to transfer the project to a subsequent purchaser through the process and keep the structure in place in order to continue to try to achieve the benefits that this project was intended to provide to the community and obviously to the lender as well. So with that, I worked with one of their counsel to come up with language that would make a subsequent purchaser a qualified purchaser for purposes of the agency's due diligence. And in your resolution, you will see that, one, there would have to be notice if there was going to be a foreclosure, that the lender would have to cure any defaults. There could be no outstanding defaults. And the lender would have to agree to assume all of the documents and all of the obligations of the company under the documents. And if the lender were then going to transfer the property out to a third party, that third party would have to satisfy, to your satisfaction, the conditions set forth in the resolution where it talks about qualified transferees. So for instance, the entity that's taking over the project would have to demonstrate that they have been doing this continuously for 10 years, that they have experience in these types of projects, that they're current with all real estate taxes owed on any projects they operate in the country, that they have no outstanding tax obligations, state or federal, that they don't have any outstanding judgments against them that have not been cured, that they have made all of their required tax filings, and that they would give you at least 2 bank references for your consideration. So if the proposed purchaser satisfied those requirements, this agency would then approve the transfer to a third party. So that is, if you are willing to consent to these types of amendments to your documents, then the lender will not require the applicant to post the $3 million extra in collateral. And the applicant has made representations in their correspondence to you that posting the additional $3 million at this stage of this project would put a stress on the project, because it's a lot of capital they would have to dedicate that they're not yet stabilized in order to be able to come up with that collateral. So I know that there is a representative of the company in the audience today. If you have any questions, either for me or the company, I believe Wendy is there, and she is their counsel.
Questions? Yes.
Normal process.
Sue,
We've done this before?
could you hear the question Sue? Ken asked, is this to,
Is this the normal?
yes, and
So-
Dirk asked if we have ever done this before, right?
We have done this before, once on, there was a Sutherland project that was refinancing to put new windows down in,
Franklin Lofts.
I don't know if it was Armory Square. I don't remember where the location of his building was, Doug's building. But they had a similar issue, that the lender would not allow them to refinance to put the new windows in unless they could ensure that the pilot structure would remain in effect for the term of the pilot. And so we did something similar on the Doug Sutherland project. I will say other IDAs do allow this type of transfer to happen. This agency has never done it up front because there is a feeling that you want to control your ability to do due diligence on anybody who is going to benefit from your incentives and operate a project. And if you just consent up front to these types of transfers, you lose that ability. So this board has always required consent ahead of time. And so they are coming to us, asking us to amend to allow this structure to take place because of the requirements of the lender in this instance, which is exactly what we did with Doug Sutherland.
So, in regards to the new subordinate position, if the property or the interest were transferred to the new transferee, SIDA's position would remain subordinate to the new transferee as well? Any interest that we may have in the project?
Your position would not change at all. And while your leases would be subordinate to the mortgage, the pilot would not be. The pilot is primary. So they have to make their pilot payments, or else you have the ability to, to shut them down. Like the pilot is treated as real property taxes. So it is not subordinate to the mortgage, but everything else is. But to answer your question, Ricky, nothing changes about your position.
Okay.
And nothing changes, anyone, be it the lender or the subsequent transferee, they have to assume every responsibility of the current applicant. Like they have to report to you. They have to show job creation. Everything that your documents require this applicant to do, the bank or the subsequent transferee would step into those shoes and have those same obligations.
Two quick questions. First, I was feeling very good when you indicated that the developer does this all over the country, and then you caused me a little bit of hesitation when you said that they had a challenge in providing an incremental $3 million in collateral or secured interest or whatever the right words are. Is there reason for us to pause? Have cause for pause?
No, not at all. you have to understand that they do this all over the country, but every single project is its own single purpose LLC. So every project is independent of the other, and they stabilize over time as any construction project would. And so to put an additional $3 million up front until this stabilizes, that's why it creates pressure on this project. It has no reflection on the company as a whole.
I suspect it's an unbudgeted 3 million.
Kathy, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I suspect it's an unbudgeted 3 million coming
Correct.
right in the middle of the construction period.
Correct. And again, Wendy is there if you have any specific questions, but yes, that is my understanding as well.
So what do they have as a contingency for this project in case if they run into different problems like
Are you asking about contingencies
this? Yeah.
in terms of their construction draw? I don't have their financials in front of me, but I'm sure that that was built into the original pro forma. It always is, and the construction lender would have required that they carry a certain percentage of contingency for overruns and change orders.
I don't have that information directly in front of me for the project when the budget was first created, but as you recall, the GC is Hubert Brewer, who we've been working with on the project, and they built in a contingency as part of the redevelopment. I just don't have those numbers right in front of me.
So, Sue, I just want to confirm that I understand this correctly, I think. In the event of a financial problem, let's just call it that, the documents that we have executed with Teaspoon and the lenders will remain in effect, and all of our requirements in those documents must be met by the new applicant, for lack of a better word. If they are not met, we have the option to amend our documents or require additional information, et cetera, et cetera. Is that correct?
Or default them.
Or default.
Right, and all the remedies you have right now carry forward. If they fail to meet one of their obligations, you can send a letter of default and they can have an opportunity to cure in accordance with your documents, or you terminate and then they go back on the tax roll. So none of that changes. And the protection you get from this language in your resolution is that you get comfort knowing that whoever it's going to after the bank has to be qualified. They have to be an entity that does this, does this kind of project. They have to have a track record. They have to be current on all their taxes. So all the things that you would look for in a new applicant, you're going to get in a qualified transferee, and you will get to know that ahead of time. The other thing I will note is the way your documents are currently drafted is at any time, an applicant can come in and ask you to approve the sale of their interest to another entity. And you would ask these questions at that point in time, too.
So just want to make sure I'm clear, Sue, in terms of what we might be exposing ourselves to. And in my simplest terms is that we might have a partner who has a reputation or has had something that we wouldn't want otherwise to partner with, but we're relinquishing the right to say we don't like the character of the party or whatever.
Well, I think that the qualifications that we've outlined for qualified transferee touches upon all of the things you would normally look at with an applicant. I mean, your due diligence is really kind of what this is.
The
Do we
same
know this
vetting-
person?
Not to interrupt you,
I'm sorry,
Sue, sorry, but do I understand it's the same vetting that would occur if it was a new application by us?
So I don't know what we are giving up then. What's our risk? Sorry, I think I ask that question all the time. What is our risk in agreeing to these terms?
There really is very little risk. What you're doing is agreeing ahead of time that if someone meets these, you will approve, versus having them come to you at the time and request your approval. This is giving the lender comfort that if they find this person will be approved, versus taking the risk of not knowing. And the other thing is, the big thing for the lender is that under your current documents, if there is a default under the mortgage, it triggers a default under your documents. So if they were to foreclose, you would terminate your documents. And what this is saying is, okay, we won't do that. We won't terminate our documents. We'll allow the bank to step in. The bank will cure and we'll go forward. So that's what you're giving up. It really has less to do about the subsequent transferee because we've protected you with the language. It's more about agreeing to allow the structure of your documents and the benefit package you've given to survive a foreclosure.
Wendy, do you want to add anything?
Wendy, do you know why they came at this phase as opposed to requesting this in the beginning in the application phase? Why now? Okay, so that's why it was late in the phase of the closing phase where they caught the language. Okay.
Who is the lender? It's nothing.
To follow up on Ricky's question, this was in the documents to begin with. This had to have been in the documents to begin with. The 3 million would have had to been put up front, right?
So they have provisions in their documents.
So they knew that when they undertook the program.
Any further questions?
I move the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Last call for comments, discussion. Hearing none. Sue?
Can I just note, because I will correct it if it gets approved before it gets executed, but on the second page, on the first whereas clause, there's a typo in the date. It says July 2003, and it should say 2023.
Right.
So I will fix those if the resolution is adopted. I just wanted people to know.
Any other comments, concerns? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request for participation in the Center Armory Garage. Eric?
Good morning, all again. So as the board will recall, the Center Armory Garage is a facility that is owned by the IDA and by the agency. And through the property and the structure, which was built in the early 1990s, which is now has eclipsed over 30 years, we understand and have an agreement in place with the city of Syracuse, which has been a longstanding agreement that we typically renew and just most recently renewed in 2022. a series of structural deficiencies and improvements that are needed within the garage. Some of this is due to deferred maintenance that has taken place over a number of years. Myself, as SIDA staff, have been working with the City of Syracuse Engineering Department, which has retained CNS companies, which does structural assessments on garages throughout the city's portfolio that it owns, but also properties that it manages, such as the Center Armory Garage. In that report, ultimately, in taking a look at the structural needs and the improvements, it has been identified of an approximate budget and a budget estimate that CNS has presented us, where there are significant improvements on the garage that are needed to be able to ensure its longevity as a continued parking asset within downtown Syracuse. As part of those discussions with the city, one of the things that we have ultimately would like to bring before the board would be the cost sharing estimate of the overall improvements of the garage, laid out in a structure which we have discussed with the city in detail, which would be up to 50% would be ultimately the cost share structure, but would be up to an amount not to exceed $500,000. Now that cost share would be a 50-50 split between the city of Syracuse ultimately, which would manage and oversee the project with CNS companies, and ultimately with the company that would be selected to improve and make the improvements. But that being said, this cost structure and what the board is being asked and presented with today would be authorization of those funds up to the $500,000 maximum amount, with the understanding that the city and the agency would split that cost 50-50. The goal would be to then undertake those improvements, if the board is ultimately comfortable and willing to proceed, would be to proceed with those improvements as soon as possible, looking to undertake them this fall, which may extend into the first quarter of 2024. This was referenced earlier in the meeting, but the Finance Committee did ultimately review, and we did discuss this in detail. The recommendation was brought to the board, ultimately a recommendation to approve, but more than happy to also answer any questions or discuss any further detail. And Sue, I see you.
I just want to add that as part of this request, we're also seeking to extend the lease agreement that we have, or the operating agreement we have with the city, because we want to get through the remediation. And so in your resolution, there's also the language regarding allowing the chair and the executive director to execute, negotiate an extension of that lease agreement for another 3 years. So I just want to point that out. You would be approving that as well.
Thank you. I just want to also add to Eric's comments that obviously once we have final numbers, final bids, et cetera, the board would be fully apprised of the dollars, the work, the times, the schedule, et cetera. Any comments, questions, concerns?
Jeff, will we have any minority goals or MBE or WBE goals?
Yes. Yes, I believe that all, well, between the city and us, we are pretty aligned, except for the local.
Correct. So I think what I would say is that the city engineering, and when we're undertaking these capital improvements, that is as one of our top goals, is to be able to build that in with the structural component. In order to move and undertake the improvements this year, there is going to be ultimately an authorization that the city will likely look to extend in order to undertake the improvements immediately. So what I will do is work with our city engineering department, make sure we're communicating SIDA's goal and making sure that that is a top priority with those utilization goals, and then we can report back. Because of the nature and just the timeline that we want to move forward with this, the city has the ability to ultimately move forward and select a contractor and move forward expeditiously. However, we'll make sure we're communicating that that needs to remain a priority as part of the improvements.
So the authorization to delegate responsibility to negotiate would be on terms at least as favorable with the city as we have now? Or maybe at least as unfavorable as we have now? Yes, thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just one other question for me. I know I asked this in the meeting last week. In terms of the potential for more spaces as this work is improved, I know a portion of the lot is inaccessible due to some of the concerns. Does that open up potential revenue opportunities with further spaces in there as well?
So it's a very good question. We know that there are, and we don't have the exact number of spaces that are currently offline, but just having recently, I had the opportunity to tour and visit the garage within the last 2 weeks. You can see a number of spaces that have been closed off because of these structural deficiencies. So once these improvements are made, all of the approximately 109, 110 spaces will be fully online and operational. And so that certainly will have the ability to increase the output, the gross receipts that we're seeing from the garage. It is one of the things that, just as a precaution, we have cordoned off those spaces to make sure that there are no impact to vehicles or things of that nature.
Other questions, comments, concerns? Is there a motion to approve the request? Thank you, Ken. Is there a second? Second, Ricky. Last call. Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Thank you all. Next item on our agenda is consideration for approval of our 2024 operational budget, which was thoroughly discussed, as I indicated, at the Finance Committee meeting. Eric?
Yes, and just a reminder, you do have a copy as well. We have physical copies before you, but also an electronic copy that was shared in the packet. So to just talk through anticipated and projections for 2024, which will begin on January 1st, starting with the revenue. So we really try each year to take a conservative approach as we are looking at projects within the pipeline and overall revenue that the agency is projected to generate. The largest revenue being typically from project fees, from that 1% fee typically as part of project closing. So ultimately that is projected at an $800,000 revenue line for next year, as well as just smaller revenue line items. One of the questions that did come up during the Finance Committee meeting that I was able to confirm is that we did see an increase in that interest income, which was a result of the higher interest rates that we're currently seeing for the funds that we have right now in our reserves and our unrestricted funds. So we're seeing a lot of different impacts on higher interest rates right now in development, but one positive benefit is we are seeing a greater increase in that interest line from revenue. So moving into really looking at largely, this is adopting a very similar budget that was done in 2023 around the revenue, just projecting for scenarios and looking at any assets that SIDA, the agency, currently has and the ability to sell. But moving into expenses, we're really trying to have a firm grasp on the different awards. What's listed here is grants and donations, but ultimately those projects that the agency has been asked to approve and undertake. This could be Downtown Committee and the programming that the Downtown Committee provides. There's other programs and projects that over the course of the year or in past years, the agency has approved. And so ultimately, this is that latest projection on what the remaining outstanding obligations are that SIDA has, and then what we're anticipating spending in the coming year to support those projects and initiatives. Ultimately, the last section here, which really is operations and administration, that is typically just the normal staffing obligations as well as general operating expenses. This will include our professional fees, which include our legal services and our accounting, with the addition of contracts that we have for technical assistance, which include the National Development Council, or NDC. The last portion, financing and other fees, all of those obligations have been met for previous things that we've talked about, such as the HUD 108 payments and previous HUD 108 debt service. So ultimately, based on the conservative projections that we have and what you have before you, we're projecting that total expenses are listed at $1.7 million, or $1,762,000, ultimately bringing us to a projected deficit of $268,000. The one note I will make, and what we will just ask the board to note as part of the authorization, would be this budget right now, as presented before you, does not incorporate the Center Armory garage structural improvements. And so we would include, as long as you, with your authorization, the ability to put $500,000 in there, again being the maximum amount that we would not exceed with that 50-50 cost share with the city. But any questions around the budget? Happy to go into more detail.
Prepared to move the budget, but I would like to just make sure that we, given the deficit, have regular recurring reporting on how we stand budget-wise, revenue and so forth during the course of next year.
Absolutely.
So moved. Second? Second. Thank you, Ricky. Any further discussion, comments? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is a request by the Downtown Committee, essentially to reallocate the distribution of their funds without changing the bottom line dollar amount. Eric?
So Kathy, just to build off what you shared, so the agency and the board, you have already approved and authorized the use of this funding for what previously was largely security focus and security patrols, particularly on the weekends for the Downtown Committee security officers that staff the downtown area, as well as maintenance environmental work that had been taking place, which includes any number of activities within the downtown area. We understand from the Downtown Committee is that there has been some difficulty with staffing all of those positions that they have open, but understanding that they've identified an additional need within the Downtown Committee operations, which is marketing and promotional services, continuing to draw more people into the downtown district and supporting those promotional efforts. What you have included in your packet is a proposed revised structure for the project, broken out into a 2-year period. We have this existing agreement we have in place with the Downtown Committee will go through June 30th of 2024. And so what they have now added in would be for the second year that was started on July 1, would be marketing, advertising, and promotions for approximately $57,500. Ultimately, again, all of the funding would be used directly by the Downtown Committee. They provide us with invoices and billing, and then we're able to then go around and disperse and reimburse their activities. We receive all those statements, so it helps us, and we're seeing the activity that the funds, SIDA's funds, are going towards. But ultimately, this would not change the overall agreement that we have in place with the Downtown Committee. It does not change the overall amount, but it would be a reallocation of funds to include that promotion and marketing support for downtown.
Yes, Mr. Thompson?
We allocated this based on the fact that they came before us and they asked us to give them increased security and increased cleanup. Because they're having problems hiring people is not our problem. The danger, I don't think you're going to draw people in with the advertising if you have the problems that are going on now. If you don't keep it clean, you don't keep saying people don't feel secure going down there. I'm saying that it was their proposal when they came to us that they needed these additional people to keep it so that they could have people come downtown. So I don't like to question people on their budget and how they restructure it, but I will question this one. I think that it's important to have the not just only security, but in the cleanup portion.
Yeah, I
That's
understand
a
what you're
big
saying.
part.
Yes, I agree.
And sorry, because I also wanted to comment on that as well. Just given the nature of some of the circumstances that have transpired in the city, most recently with the 2 teens that we unfortunately lost in that, creating an opportunity to create employment opportunities, especially for youth-aged kids, and especially a job opportunity for cleaning downtown, for example. Better allocation of these funds as opposed to appointing them to marketing and promotion. I'm in agreement with Steve. I think that in order to attract people here, you need to address those major. There have been several incidents throughout the summer related to the security of downtown, and I think that we need to strengthen our efforts there and not take away from what we propose in terms of the security measures and cleaning in order to be able to attract and sustain what we built in downtown.
So what I'd like to do, unless there is additional suggestion or objection, I'd like to propose that we hold this item and invite Merica. I don't want to speak for her decision, and give us an opportunity, invite her to our next meeting, give us an opportunity to ask her directly the challenges, as she points out in her letter, what are the challenges for the security and the hiring, et cetera, and what is the balance here? And let her address our concerns before we take any further action. Is that reasonable, agreeable? Is there
think that's
something
fair.
additional
I have an opportunity to ask
that
questions.
anybody would like or would prefer to hear? Work?
Yes, I'd also like, I think it might be meaningful for us to see how this budget, effectively a budget, fits into the downtown committee's overall. Maybe they have other resources that, or maybe they don't have other resources that need to be shuffled around. So when she, if we could get some sense as how this fits into their total operation.
What I would just add is that, so in other hats that I wear within the city is just working very closely with Syracuse Police around looking at just continuing monitoring and evaluation and the coordination that I've been a part of between the downtown committee security staff as well as with Syracuse Police, and particularly the patrols that cover the downtown footprint. And it is one of the things is that they are working in lockstep to make sure communication is strong between the two. We're seeing staffing challenges within the department, and we're seeing staffing challenges with the downtown committee security as well. So they've been working through really providing as much support to the downtown district as possible, just like throughout areas across the city. But that is one of the things that it's not being done in a vacuum between what the downtown committee is doing, but also the coordination that I personally have witnessed with Syracuse Police. I think that America certainly would be able to better speak to some of the thought process and how they've been addressing the staffing challenges. So.
Everybody in agreement?
To
Yes?
put it on the table and
To
have it
hold it for the next meeting, and we'll have America come. Good? All right. Next item on the agenda is a motion that I would propose to further extend the effective date of our UTEP to the end of this year. We're continuing to see a lot of volatility in the market, as well as the recent rollout of rezone, which is starting to address the set-asides and the various different things that are that need to be aligned between our policy and their policies. So I just would, the project approval policy with our local hire and MWBE commitments will remain in effect. We are expecting a report from Teaspoon October 10, 11 in there for our October meeting, which will be our second quarter report from them to see how that is progressing. But I think we just need a little bit more time to get everything lined up correctly.
Would they otherwise sundown? Could they stop somehow? You're looking for an extension?
Extension.
So does that mean that they would?
I don't know, you gotta ask the lawyer. Lawyer?
You adopted a new UTEP in January.
Right.
But we almost immediately asked you to put a pause on the effective date. So what you have now is your old UTEP is controlling until the new UTEP effective date goes into play. So it was set to go into play this month, and the chair is asking that we extend it through the end of the year. So for the balance of the year, your existing UTEP would continue to control until the new effective date occurs, in which, in that event, the new UTEP will spring into action.
So we need to align all of our words, basically, with rezone and the set-asides for housing and affordable units, et cetera. And I hope that some of the housing study policies that will come out of that, which you heard from Michelle, will come across all the policies, zoning, us, everybody. And it just has, all the words have to be aligned.
How active are those discussions now? Like what is the frequency?
So the first meeting of the second phase of the housing study is today, correct?
Correct.
It starts today. And Sue and I and Eric have been discussing the UTEP changes specifically. Take a little more time to get it all bundled into the right package. There's not, I don't think, there's nothing insurmountable. It's just the words. It's just getting all the words right.
And I will note also, the city is continuing to work on those same issues under rezone. So they're putting together their manual and how they're going to apply the set-asides and what the metrics are going to be. And the city's not quite there yet, so we just want to make sure that, as Kathy indicated, they are aligned, and we don't want to make a mistake, so a little bit more time will allow us to get it right.
Further questions, discussion? Thank you, Ken. Rick? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Is there any new business, any questions, any other items to be addressed?
Only thing I will just do is I do want to recognize and welcome Kyle DeMarco, our Business Development Program Manager, directly involved in our day-to-day operations of SIDA, but attending his first SLDC and SIDA Board of Directors meeting. So welcome, Kyle.
Welcome, Kyle. Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Thanks, Ken. Second?
Second.
Ricky? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Thank you.
Sue, thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
day, everyone.
All right, Sue, take care. Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
Yes, be
Thank
safe.
you too, Ricky. Bye-bye.
Bye.